to give us a bit of what I'll do is I'll highlight you first.
I'm going to use some slides, Alistair, so I'll share my screen if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, and I'm happy to send these slides around if people want them. Somebody give me a nod or a shout when you can see it.
Yep, that's good.
All good. Right, okay. Listen, everybody, thanks a million for having me today. We've got a bit of a mixed audience, some professionals, some families. I did this, it's pretty much the exact same presentation this morning to local authority ILF leads and members of the Social Work Scotland and the Social Care Committee. I know that there was definitely people there from Renfrewshire and Aberdeenshire, so if any of the folk here were also at that meeting, apologise. You'll be hearing the same thing over again as you heard this morning. Moira, this is largely the same as you heard last week or whenever it was, 2 Mondays ago or something when we were speaking to colleagues in the Scottish Government meeting. So apologies to you, definitely, Moira, because you'll have heard most of this before. Anyway, having said that, let's get going. I'm just going to try and be very quick today. This morning, I tried to do this quickly this morning, and it took a lot longer than planned because there were so many questions and comments. But I'll do my best to be efficient. But move me along if you're running out of time, okay? Don't be shy to shout out, and don't be shy to tell me to hurry up. I'm just going to talk a wee bit about the background, why ILF's involved in this, how we became to be involved, what our current position is in relation to this agenda, a wee bit of some of the thinking around how we're going to deliver this new fund, and then some opportunity for questions and comments. I'd just like to start by introducing the organisation ILF Scotland, because we've discovered that in recent times that not everybody's aware of the status of our organisation. So I think it's really important that people know what kind of an organisation we are, because that dictates what we do and how we do it. We're a public body, a non-departmental public body, and we're wholly owned by the Scottish Government ministers. So our bosses are the government. We are accountable to the Scottish Government ministers through a board, and that board are all appointed by government ministers through public appointments process. And so in essence, our job is to do what the Scottish Government ministers tell us to do, to deliver their policies, and Coming Home is one of their policies that they want us to help with. We have one focus, that's on independent living for disabled people. I think that's really significant. That sets the values, the culture of the organisation, and it means that we never get distracted by anything else. We just have a pure focus on independent living for disabled folk, and it's a privilege to be able to do that. We have a few funds. We've got our main ILF fund, which we inherited from the DWP in 2015. It used to be a UK-wide thing, ILF. It was set up in 1988, and then the government in London closed it down in 2015, and the Scottish Government decided that they wanted to keep it going, so they created our very own ILF Scotland, and we deliver that main fund that we inherited from DWP across Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. We also have a new transition fund that we opened in 2017, I think it was, which offers grant funding to young disabled people to support their transition from childhood to adult services. And that's hugely popular, enormous demand for that service, but it does really good stuff for those young people. We have a reopened fund. The main ILF fund was closed to new applications by the Westminster Government, but the Scottish Government have reopened it. So we now accept applications from new folk to come into the fund, which I'll touch on again in a minute. And we now will be administering this new Coming Home fund as soon as we can make it happen. I just want to give a few quotes which just set the context of ILF's involvement in Coming Home. So our potential involvement with Coming Home dates way back to prior to the Coming Home report, McDonald's report being published. Back in 2018, we were working with Scottish Government on what we called at the time a national top-up scheme, and it was just a development of part of Scottish Government's review of adult social care which recognised that for local authorities or for health and social care partnerships, they potentially had unlimited financial liability to meet the eligible needs of their population. And there was a recognition that that was creating challenges, and we see those challenges even today through things like the ever tightening of eligibility criteria, which is the only mechanism that local authorities really have, or the main mechanism, I should say, to ensure that they are able to meet the level of demand they have in their area by restricting the demand through the application of eligibility criteria. And the thinking at the time was, well, if we can provide a national resource to local authorities or health and social care partnerships over and above a certain local limit for any individual, that would make a big difference in terms of their practice. There was a recognition, and I don't know if you will agree with this or not, but the sense was that the assessment process undertaken by social work was compromised because of the financial reality within which they were working. And the recognition that any assessment had to go through a RAS process or some equivalent like that, and therefore the assessments weren't as holistic and person-led as people would have liked them to have been. But if the local authority knew that there was a maximum amount that they would ever have to pay for any individual, that would change that and make the assessment process more holistic and person-led. So that was the theory at the time. However, that didn't go anywhere. The truth is that it didn't go anywhere for political reasons. COSLA at that point objected to that because they didn't want ILF to be reopened at that time, and they didn't want any resource to be delivered by a national body that was for things that were statutorily their responsibility. So social care was their responsibility. Why would the government give money to deliver local authorities' responsibilities to a national organisation? So that didn't happen at that time. And so we just essentially parked ILF involvement in Coming Home at that point. Subsequently, we had the Independent Review of Adult Social Care, Derek Feely review, published in 2021, and Derek Feely in his review recommended that the Independent Living Fund should be reopened. And it did reopen. It reopened just over 2 years ago in April 2024, and that has kind of changed the landscape within which we're operating, and has probably been instrumental in changing the position of the government around ILF being involved in Coming Home. So we opened it a couple of years ago. The way the reopened ILF works is all applications must come through social work, at least to date that's the case. So we have got really strong relationships with our social work colleagues across the country now, and every local authority. I'm pleased to see that at least one ILF lead is here today. And we have had literally over 200, I think, meetings with individual local social work teams across the country over the last few years around the reopening of the fund. And we've had a good working relationship with COSLA as well now. And we have a joint written agreement with COSLA that sets out how we work together in the best interests of the individual disabled folk that we jointly support. The fund was reopened through a process of co-production. We take that very, very seriously. That co-production work is still ongoing now, actually, over 2 years after the fund opened. That group still meets and have been absolutely wonderful in providing us with really good direction and intelligence and support. That group's made up of COSLA, of a number of local authority colleagues, of Scottish Human Rights Commission, of CCPS, and a number of other voluntary organisations, ourselves and ILF, Scottish Government, and others. And that group made recommendations to the Minister about what the reopened fund would look like. And part of those recommendations was a number of priorities that they said we would like ILF to look at with Scottish Government after reopening. And one of those priorities was consideration of any potential role for ILF in supporting those identified in the Coming Home report or in similar contexts. So despite the fact at that point there was no suggestion of ILF being involved in Coming Home, again, the co-production working group could see that there was a fit there, and we're keen to explore that. Okay. Just to say, so we've had over 1,500 applications to the Reopen Fund in the first 2 years. All of those applications have been made by social work, and we're really grateful to our social work colleagues for the support with that. I think that shows, the nature of the relationship that we now have with our social work colleagues, which is largely positive. Moving on a wee bit, to where we are at the minute. Just I think it was either February or March this year, the National Care Service Advisory Board, which was set up by the Scottish Government last year, uh, they they identified a number of key priority areas for their work. One of those priority areas was the coming home, and they submitted their recommendations to the minister for coming home work just a month or two ago, and that included this recommendation to reconsider this national top-up scheme that had previously been developed with Scottish Government and Independent Living Fund, and to provide appropriate funding for us to deliver that fund and to run that fund. So that went to the minister, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago. Subsequent to that, there was obviously the action plan that Moira has referred to already, the new Coming Home action plan that was published in March, and a day or two after the publication of that, Scottish Government put out a statement of which this was a part, that the funding will build on more than 20 million quid that has already been distributed through the Community Living Change Fund, with a significant proportion expected to be provided via ILF. So obviously we were pleased to see that, but we didn't quite understand what it meant. What is a significant proportion? Was that half of it, all of it, none of it, like a tiny bit of it? We didn't know. And expected to be provided didn't mean that it would be provided. It was expected rather than would be. So although we're pleased to see that statement, it generated more questions than answers for us, I guess, at that stage. And subsequent to that, we've had more clarification through lots of dialogue with the SG, and that, I think that this statement that was in the SNP's election manifesto recently gives us a bit more clarification in the public domain, and that is that it's recurring investment, which was really good, because the initial 20 million quid was not recurring. It was a one-off 20 million. We now know that this 20 million will be recurring. It says starting with 20 million, so that's good as well. That means that it's not necessarily fixed at 20 million. We'll see what happens when the fund's up and running and what the demand's like and the expenditure's like. But at least, that tells us there's recognition that 20 million may have to grow in future years. It tells us that it will all be delivered through ILF, so we will now be delivering the full 20 million, starting with 20 million, and whatever it happens to be in the years ahead will be delivered through ILF, and it'll be continuing with the existing ILF model, which is about wrapping the finance around the individual. Any money administered through ILF will go to the individual disabled person with whatever support they require to manage that fund with family or a financial support organisation or whoever it may be. So that's a wee bit more clarification that we've now got, which again is really helpful. So I'll just get into a wee bit of the detail now about our current thinking about how this is going to work. Nothing's written in stone yet. We're listening very carefully to as many people as we can. Our time scale is really short. We've had the election now. We know it will be another SNP administration. My understanding is that the ministers will be appointed by government on the 21st of September, or round about that date, not very far away. That's a week away. So we'll give or take within a week, we should know who our new minister is. The last minister was Tom Arthur. We don't know if it'll still be Mr. Arthur or someone else. And then whoever it is, they'll need a wee bit of time to get their feet under the desk and get on top of their portfolio and stuff. But we've been told that this will be not the number one on their priority list for the new minister, but it'll be number 2 or 3. So it's a significant priority for them. So our objective is to get concrete proposals to the minister before the end of this month, so about 2 weeks away. That's what we're aiming for, and it's a tall order, I know, but that's the objective, because we understand the criticality of this agenda, particularly for families. So we want to be up and running as soon as we can. We're trying to model it as closely as we can on existing ILF, but we'll need to make some design changes to fit this particular group. The first thing is about access to the fund, or eligibility. Who will be eligible to benefit from this new fund? at the moment, ILF uses a thing called a threshold sum, which is about the size of their, essentially these days, it's about the size of somebody's SDS budget. It's taken as an indication of the level of need that they have. And so the assumption, which is flawed, but it works to a point, is that the bigger somebody's SDS budget, the more complex their needs, or the language we prefer to use is the greater the barriers to independent living that they face. We don't want to use that model here. We don't think it's appropriate for this particular group. And what we're thinking is that we will use the dynamic support register as the means by which we determine who is eligible. And after lots of conversation with lots of social work folk over the last few weeks, the sense is that apparently the DSR has red, green and amber categories in it. The red category is likely to be those that will be eligible for ILF. That includes people who are in hospital, people who are in inappropriate out of area placements, and people who are in the community at present, but at significant risk of community breakdown. And so that our thinking at the minute is that will be, at least in the early days for the first period of time, access to the fund will be determined by you being in the red category of the dynamic support register. And I think we're quite comfortable with that. Initially, there was a preference expressed by Scottish Government that we would start with those in hospital over 10 years. We absolutely understand the rationale for that, but we feel that we shouldn't restrict it just to that group, that there's so many other people with such significant need in such circumstances that we should be broader, a wee bit more broad than that, and use the red category on the DSR. And that kind of covers what we had probably had in our heads in terms of who would access it. And of course, we will absolutely have to be dependent on our local authority colleagues again, because they will know who these people are. They will know. We don't have access to the DSR, certainly not at the minute, so we will need others to help us with the prioritisation. And each local area will have their own local priorities and will have their own ideas about who they really need to get support to first, and we hope to benefit from collaboration there. At the minute, ILF, there's a maximum amount of money that somebody who gets ILF can get. It ranges from between £330 and £1,000 a week. I'll not go into the reasons why there's difference there, but in every case, the money is intended to focus on achieving, particularly Article 19, realisation of people's right to independent living, and additionality. It's intended not to fund anything that should be funded by the local area. So anything that's locally eligible need, we won't fund that. Our focus is on funding things over and above that, what we call additionality, quality of life type outcomes for folk. But what we're proposing here is that there's no maximum award, and I'm sure everyone will agree with this. Nobody should be too expensive to live in their local community. So if it costs a lot of money for somebody to get home or to stay at home, then that's fine. We will be able to not set any maximum amount of money that can be spent on any individual like we do at the moment. So I'm getting a thumbs up from Alistair and somebody else there, but that I've been really pleased. We made that suggestion early on in our initial conversations with Scottish Government and others, and there was universal acceptance that was the right thing to do, including from Scottish Government. Sometimes when you don't set a maximum, it can make people a wee bit nervous because they worry the costs will run away, etc. But there was no question that this was the right thing to do. If money is an issue and keeping somebody in an institutional inappropriate setting, then let's remove that barrier by making sure there's no financial cap on getting somebody home. Okay, so that I have not had any objections to that as yet. What can the money be used for? How will it work? Well, we plan to have kind of 3 different ways that people can access the money. The first one is how the current main ILF works. It's just a monthly payment that we give to the individual disabled person every month for as long as they remain eligible for the fund, and in most cases that's for the rest of the person's life. So essentially what we're talking about here is a lifetime monthly award of X pounds per month that will be reviewed on a kind of routine basis, probably every 2 years, but that's how it'll work. People will be given X amount of pounds to pay for the cost of their care and support in the community, and there will be no maximum amount there. We also recognise lots of people have talked about the challenges of the transition phase from somebody who is in an institutional setting or an out of area placement and is trying to move home. It can be very difficult for local areas to both fund the existing placement, which can be very expensive, and to fund all the costs of setting up a new service, identifying a provider, employing the team, getting all the training done, all that kind of stuff that comes with getting ready for discharge or for a move or for transition. So we also plan to enable people to have a temporary award. In addition to the main award that's lifelong, there will also be a temporary award that people can access to meet those additional costs, dual costs at the time of the transition. And people have also spoken to us about like one-off capital type costs being a barrier to folk getting out of institutions or to staying at home, and that's things like adaptations to people's homes or furniture and equipment for people's homes or for good quality person-centered planning or advocacy input. All these things we can pay one-off amounts of money to that person to meet these additional costs, whatever they may be. And I would just say that we're working to the principle that our objective is to say yes to things, not and say no as little as we possibly can. There probably will be sometimes we have to say no to things. We can't fund things that are illegal, for example, and we can't fund things that would compromise people's entitlement to benefits. So there will be certain things, but our objective is to try and say yes where we can, as much as we possibly can. So people will be able to access one, two, or all three of these different types of award at different stages in their lives. So this is a key bit, I guess. I've been really surprised at social work professionals in particular response to this idea of setting a local cap. And we've had quite a lot of resistance to setting a general cap of X pounds per week that the local area would never be expected to pay over. I'll not pretend to fully understand those objections. It was that meeting Moira was at, where I can't remember who it was, somebody from Glasgow or Renfrewshire, I think it was Renfrewshire, was saying, look, it feels to me like setting a cap on our liability is letting us off the hook. This is our responsibility. We have that statutory responsibility. It was really open, saying essentially we have failed these people for years and we need to own that responsibility, and we need to do better, and we need to make this work. And it feels like setting a cap is kind of abdicating us of some responsibility. That's the best I can explain it, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. Anyway, the current thinking is that we won't set an overall cap that applies across the whole country, but an individual cap to local authorities' contributions to someone's overall care and support arrangements will be agreed on a case-by-case basis. The way ILF used to work, when it was ILF UK, there would be a tripartite negotiation and agreement between the ILF assessor, the local social worker, and the individual and their family. And in that conversation, there'll be an agreement, right? The local authority's contribution will be X, and ILF's contribution above that will be Y, and that'll be agreed. And there'll be certain, conditions attached to that around, what are the circumstances if a local authority wants to reduce its contribution? Well, we would do that through negotiation as well. There's also chat about for some folk that have very, very high current costs, yes, Tom Kelly's right. Moira, you're right. It was Tom. Current costs are very high for some folk, and we've heard stories and examples of people's current provision in out of country hospital places costing well over £1 million a year. And so for people like that, you would, my understanding would be that their costs of their care and support post moving back to their community would be significantly less. So there's an instant saving there, financial for the local area. So presumably the barrier to that person moving back home is not a financial one, because actually that should be an incentive for the local authority to save significant sums potentially. So in those cases, we've talked about, well, how do we manage that in terms of what the local authority's liability is relative to ILF's liability? And we don't have an answer to that yet. We're working through that at the minute, but one suggestion is that that the local authority would be expected to maintain X percentage of their current costs, and if the cost post move are more than that, then ILF would pick up the costs above that. But that's currently being considered by my policy colleagues. also similar thing applies, I guess, to NHS. So there are some people whose all of someone's costs at the moment are met by the NHS with no cost to the local authority, but the local authority will pick up that cost when the person moves back to their community. What do we do in those circumstances? In an ideal world, integrated world, that shouldn't be an issue because the money would follow the person. But I'm told by everybody that that would not be the case. If someone's current funding is by NHS in an NHS setting somewhere, if they move into a community setting, the NHS money will not go with them. So that means that money has to be found jointly between the local authority, the local area, and ILF. So that'll probably be individual negotiation. I think a number of folk have raised this issue about this is going to incentivise people moving on to the dynamic support register if local areas understand that by being on the DSR, you therefore have the potential to access potentially significant funds of additional money through ILF. They're going to want to put people onto the DSR. Again, mostly social work professionals are a bit uncomfortable with that, and for good reason. But other people are saying, well, maybe that's not a bad thing because that will give us a better understanding than we have at the minute about what is the need out there, how many people are in this situation that aren't necessarily already on the DSR. And again, I don't have an answer for that. That's just part of the thinking at the moment. Sorry. I just wanted to say, particularly for our local authority colleagues here, that ILF's offer here is absolutely founded on the principles of mutual trust and respect, recognising your statutory responsibilities. We're not wanting to take over those responsibilities. We're absolutely committed to collaborative working at all times. We already have a joint written agreement with COSLA about how we work together, respecting each other's separate roles and separate policies, and a commitment to working at all times in the best interest of the individual disabled person with whom we have joint responsibility, and that works well. So just to make that clear from the outset, that's the way we will be working. Having said that, we also employ lots of social workers. We call them ILF assessors. They're almost all social workers with a few OTs, I think, in the mix. We will be offering their support if that would be helpful in any individual case. So any case that comes to this fund will be allocated an ILF assessor, and they will do their ILF thing. However, we have social workers all over the country, and we hear quite regularly that one of the barriers that the people are facing in relation to coming home is social work capacity. That the work with this group of people is intense, it's long term, it takes a lot of time, and sometimes social work, because of their need to prioritise crisis situations, etc., on a day-to-day basis, sometimes the barrier is lack of social work capacity to commit to that dedicated, intensive, long-term relationship building, discharge planning, assessment, etc. That will not be the case in every area and for every person, but we are told that that's an issue. So we will be able to say to social workers, look, if it's helpful for you to borrow one of our social workers to do some of the legwork for you, then we will make that offer, and obviously you don't have to accept it, but that's something that will hopefully be available to folk as we progress. And then this is quite contentious, I guess, and again, we don't have an answer to this. So as things stand at the minute, ILF can only be applied for by social workers. Social workers know their population and they know the priorities, and they write the application and they locally prioritise who they want to put forward for ILF. I expect that in the Coming Home Fund, that'll be largely the same. Social work will lead on that work. You actually, to be on the DSR red category, you need to have planning already in place from social work. That's part of the criteria for getting into the red category of the DSR. So those plans should already be in place, and we will work with those plans with local areas. But we've also had lots of requests to provide an opportunity for families to come directly to ILF. People have told us about strained relationships sometimes between families and social work when people are on the DSR or in out of area placements or in difficult situations. And I suppose it's probably inevitable in those circumstances that there will be pressure on those relationships. So I think it's in recognition of that people have asked, can there be a direct route to ILF for families? Now, I don't know the answer to that. There's a lot of folk have responded to that by saying that's really risky. Because we're going to raise expectations unrealistically here. Every family in this situation is going to want to come to ILF and try and access the fund directly, and we can't help everybody. Certainly can't help everybody right at the start. You know, this is going to take a long time to get right. This ILF involvement here is not a panacea. It's going to take years. And it's going to probably, like all the other ILF funds that we started up, it takes time to build. So we kind of like the idea of families being able to come directly to us, but we're a wee bit concerned about raising expectations unrealistically. So don't know, I'd be interested to get your views on that. What we have said is, should there be an opportunity for families to come to us, and in fact some families have already come directly to us despite the fact that this isn't even running yet, then our first port of call will be for us to engage with the appropriate local authority social work team or social worker. We wouldn't in any way be trying to cut out social work at all. Our default position in every case will be an initial discussion with social work before we go anywhere else. If we do provide this direct family referral route, and I'm not sure that that's likely to happen in the very early stage, but I don't know yet. So that's where we're at the minute. We're just working this up as quickly as we possibly can. I'm conscious that we're making compromises in terms of co-production. We would normally do much more extensive co-production than we're doing at the minute. We do have a co-production working group already for the reopened fund, and we will be speaking to them the week after next, I think it is. But well, like all things ILF, this will evolve and develop over time. We've taken the decision to just crack on as quickly as we can, engaging as widely as we possibly can, and taking as many views as we can, but getting it up and running as soon as we can as well, and then building further developments for people to help us co-produce the development of the fund, I guess, rather than the setup of the fund as time goes by, because it will evolve over time when we learn from the experience of opening. So I will stop sharing and stop there. My apologies if that took too long, but it was as quick as it could be.
That's really helpful. It's a lot of information. So what I'm going to suggest is we can keep the recording going just while we ask general questions. A reminder that we're recording. We're going to put this on the internet, so please don't ask questions that are specific round about personal information at this stage. We're just looking for any general feedback, general clarifying questions about what Peter shared. Does anybody want to come in with any questions? Sylvia.
You're on mute, Sylvia.
I just want to ask, when they move into the community, that the health money wouldn't go along with them. But what I was thinking would be best was, like, if they go into the hospital, the health and the social money pay for them in the hospital. And when they're out in the community, that happens as well. Because what happening is, they get into the hospital and then so they've not got the coming off their own money, so they're in the hospital for quite a long time. Whereas if it was half all parts of it, then they would all be wanting the same thing, to get them out as quick or get them in as quick, not whatever. But when it's only coming from the one, and then it'll be took away from them to come to the other, then it kind of gets stuck a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not quite sure, Sylvia. I mean, I would love NHS money to follow people You know, when we did all the hospital closures a way back, the money was transferred from NHS to local areas to individuals, and I would like to see that happen here as well. And you know, some folk have spoke to us about trying to align this with the reduction in specialist inpatient beds, and doing it a similar thing, but in a slower, more controlled way, I guess, a longer term way. But I don't know if that'll go anywhere or not. I don't know, Sylvia. That's beyond me, I think.
Thanks. Ian?
Maybe just a couple of comments that I'm really pleased that you're reconsidering, or you're thinking about the 10 years rule sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I think that's a major barrier. So we're working with a number of people who wouldn't, if that was the rule, they wouldn't have met that despite the fact that they are young people and will have spent a significant part of their lives. You know, some people up to half of their life in hospital, but wouldn't have met that criteria yet. So I think we're delighted that that's like something that's being considered. And my other comment is about the capacity of social work. So, you know, so we know that social work is stretched. Not many social work practitioners in terms of the role that they have. So I'm pleased that that's been acknowledged as well, because where we've supported some people recently who are on the register to move out in Perth and in Dundee, and we've got agreement at the beginning that this is a long-term, this is a lot of resource and a long-term commitment of social work, not only in the planning and the transition, but post-transition when the real work needs to be done. And we need social work and other disciplines to stay round the table, and where that's happened, we've had great success. So I think it's good that we recognise the resources of social work, but they need to be there. They need to be on the table. But if you have capacity to supplement that in some places, I think that's a great offer.
Thanks a lot, Ian. And you just reminded me of something else to say, that, you know, there will be people who aren't able to apply for this fund because they're not on the red category of DSR, but everybody, you know, still can apply to the existing ILF fund. So that's still available for everybody who's eligible for that, which is the model based on the threshold sum. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian. Liz?
Just take that down. I'm kind of echoing some of the things that Ian raised as well. It's fantastic, just the whole concept and helping it, you know, working with the Coming Home report and putting it into practice. It comes with a whole different set of challenges. One of the things I really wanted to mention today, I was at another meeting this morning. I just put a wee thing in the chat, but I'm just going to just get it in there, I suppose. One of the difficulties that we've got is in relation to like kind of bridging between in terms of mobility and transport and PIP. So if you're in hospital, if you've not got a mobility vehicle, before you're in hospital, you don't have one and you can't apply until you're home, and that can take a number of months. But for some people who are maybe in hospital for a long period of time, their community access is imperative to the success of the plan. So we find it quite problematic in terms of funding, because we don't have a funding stream for emergency vehicles, and private contract hires cost a lot of money for short periods of time, and it can be on a week-to-week basis. I'm just wondering if, in terms of the flexibility of the funds, would that be something that could be considered? Because I know that would help quite a lot of families out.
So just to be clear, Liz, what are you asking? If could we fund like taxis or transport costs or
like
actual
short-term
vehicles
car hire, like especially short-term car hire, until the mobility vehicles are in place, or the adaptations have been done to the mobility vehicle. We do find that quite problematic because there's no funding stream.
Yeah, so I am going to stick to the principle I set out at the beginning of this, which is that we're trying not to say no and trying to say yes. So I think absolutely, if that's the barrier, if access to transport is one of the barriers that is making it difficult for someone to make the transition that they're trying to make in their life, then absolutely, yes, I'm quite sure that we would be more than happy to fund that.
Great.
It's good news. Perfect.
I'm conscious
Okay.
all this is being recorded and this.
I know.
No, fine, it's absolutely fine. Yeah, you need to hold me to it. If we were saying no to that at one point
this is your
down the
position
road, you
just
can
now.
pull
Yeah,
out this recording.
Thank you. Okay, Moira.
Yes. Oh, hello. Well, I for one am really delighted to hear that you're even considering the idea of self-referrals to the fund. And my personal view, I suppose my organisational view, is that really is what ought to happen. I can understand all the complexities around why it might not happen, and I just wonder whether you might consider some kind of pilot programme where you kind of, you diverted some resources into self-referrals and the rest would remain with the kind of the social work referrals, and then you could perhaps evaluate if there's any difference in the outcomes. So not trying to give you work to do, but just giving you something to think about.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you, Moira. Yeah, I'll put that forward to my colleagues in ILF and Scottish Government and COSLA, I guess, as well, about that idea of a pilot, because suppose it's the uncertainty of the implications of doing it that are making us hesitant. So if there was a small pilot that we could learn from, that would probably be helpful in informing the ultimate decision there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
Brilliant. I've got a couple of questions as well, Peter, if that's okay. So just really, there's not much good news, is there? Really, there's not much good news generally going about social care, and I genuinely think this gladdens my heart. It really does, because the amount of time that all of us sit in meetings and we can see the gap between what's available and what we need to make this happen for people, and we just argue round in circles about how we can't, and sometimes it's not that big a gap, how we just can't make it happen. And one of the things that I think is specifically quite relevant to the notion of who makes the applications is that I've been in a situation just recently where there's been a bit of gatekeeping about access to the person who makes the ILF applications generally. So because they're not involved in the meetings, yes. I've suggested a couple of things that have been identified as absolutely, well, one in particular that's been absolutely crucial in maintaining the young man's mental health, but the local authority won't pay for it. For it, because it's a quality of life, it's an enhancement, and they don't want the responsibility of maintaining it. But we've been asking for probably 4 months maybe to have a discussion with the person. So we're not even getting to have the discussion with the person who would make the application to you. So the problem is that level of gatekeeping, just we're having a bit where it's felt like it's like, oh, this is just a nice to have. You're going to say no to this. So I guess what we want to do is make sure that things get to you quickly, and there's not massive numbers of steps and gaps.
Yeah. So okay, thanks, Alistair. That's interesting. I mean, I'm guessing you're talking about the existing reopened ILF, and what we've found as the 2 years have gone by is that local areas they're all different, but as a general rule, have become much more particular about the local prioritization of who's going to apply to ILF. So in the early days, applications were really slow to come in for a whole host of reasons, including what we've covered earlier, social work capacity, and that gave us real concern. And we're actually running the pilot through Glasgow Centre for Inclusive Living at the minute, which is just about to get up and running, where applications can go through them rather than social work. But some of the very early learning from that is that actually local areas aren't overly keen on giving up any of their allocated ILF places because they want to have control over who's prioritised for it. And they all have different mechanisms by which to manage that. In some ways, that's really good because it tells us, right, they've got their act together now. They've worked out a system and they're applying that system and maximising the uptake of ILF. And they're the ones with the local knowledge of the whole population, etc. So I'm actually quite pleased about that. But this is the dilemma that we have about with families. So families can't come direct to the current ILF, and the family's view is often that I really need it, and I'm quite sure that they often really do need it, but they're not prioritised by the local area who control the application process. So it's that dilemma, and if I'm really brutally honest, it goes back to the fact that this is a resource-led intervention. You know, there is the reopened ILF, and for that matter, at least to begin with, the Coming Home Fund is a finite amount of money. Our job is to maximise the impact that money has in people's lives. But I keep using the phrase, it's not a panacea, it's not going to fix everything for everybody. And I guess that's at the heart of the concern about opening it up to families, that the families will apply who won't be able to get access to the fund because there's a limited resource there. It's not led by need, it's led by resource, or it's constrained by resource rather than led by resource. The constraint on the numbers of people that can be supported is resource, which is not how anybody would want it to be, but it's never going to be any other way, you know.
No, I appreciate that. I guess the situation that I'm seeing is one where there can be different interpretations of what's assessed need, what the contribution of the thing that's being suggested will have to the person's mental health, their well-being, the likelihood of their placement breakdown, and I think that it's at that kind of level where if it's not going to happen necessarily that often, but if somebody's not taking that holistic view of, there's a number of things going not very well for this young man, and he could potentially lose, that things could break down, that we would want to make sure that we maximize the things that do work. So something that might not be a priority for somebody else might absolutely be a priority here. But
I mean, listen, that sounds like bread and butter for ILF, Alistair. That's what we're doing with the existing Group 4, or we call it Group 4, the existing reopen fund. That's what we're doing. So our approach is very different. So for the person you're talking about just now, have a think about whether an existing ILF, well, no, you've said that already, the local authority or their gatekeeping was the term you use. Yeah, okay. But the principle, that's absolutely what we do. You might get there.
That's fine. Yeah. Thanks very much, Peter. Polly.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's just related to this, and sorry if you already said this, Peter, but I've got workies in my house and I got distracted massively in the middle. But it's just a question relating to that, I suppose. Is the intention to have the local authority folk the same people as the current ILF coordinators within the local authority, or do you reckon this will be somebody else or a bit wider? Just thinking about how to avoid that funneling gatekeeping.
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, every area already has an ILF lead. My understanding is that every area also has a Coming Home lead. So how they coordinate together, I don't know. I guess that would be for each area to determine. The other thing that we're not really sure about yet is the overall governance structures for Coming Home, including ILF and every other aspect of it, and where we as an organisation will fit into those structures, and what role each of the different bodies that are being proposed will play in terms of management of the DSR, etc. So we're just waiting to see how that develops over the next couple of months. And there will be a national support panel, which I understand will have a kind of oversight role in terms of the DSR. There'll be a strategic oversight group, which will have a strategic overview of the whole of the Coming Home programme. There's going to be, I think, a finance group, and I can't remember what else. Lots of structures to be put in place, is my understanding. I'm hoping that they're as simple as possible, because I think that'll work better. But we don't know what they look like yet.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. I'm going to stop recording there, get you off the hook.